Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's they, them, whatever your pronoun you wish to be. Whatever you wish, we respect it here at the Dr. Zero Free Magic Secret Show, where we talk about all kinds of free magic. And one of the most key features of magic in all the traditions across the board is the importance of the moon. In astrology and mythology, everywhere you look, it's the central ingredient. You can compact all of the most poetic philosophy of astrology and every tradition, and it all just transfers down to the moon. And that's the importance of witchcraft. It cuts right to the point. It gets all the clutter out of the way. But I think it's okay to, at this point, extend witchcraft higher than simply looking at the moon. And I appreciate all the things, but the idea is keep reaching upwards. You don't have to be a ritual magician putting it all in the context of Kabbalah, but it's important to know the further psychic steps. And one of the most important fundamental things, if you're going to move forward at all, is understanding the phases of the moon. Because the thing is, in the old days, the importance of the wheel of life, or the wheel of the year, that the Celts had, the Druids pushed. The Druids were like timekeepers and referees of it. And basically they had set up goalposts of how the human being would move throughout the year with certain holidays and such around the equinoxes and the solstices and such, because it's all part of the biorhythms of Earth, right? It's like a spinning wheel, and they're like, at this point, we send the cows out to pasture. At this point, we have the middle of the blah, et cetera, et cetera. They divided the year in two ways, and they follow time by the moon. The 13 months, I believe, of the lunar 13 moons of the year, what have you. Correct. So basically, what I'm getting at is that there's astrology, there's the zodiac. A lot of people don't understand the zodiac exists in you. It's your mile marker in conjunction with everything happening around you. It's like it's something that's built within you. It's not in the stars. I mean, it's kind of in the stars philosophically, but it's the biological impulse within you moving with the seasons. Think of it like that. And just the same way, everybody moves with the moon. And the Druids had the lunar calendar, and it was called the Caligny calendar, and that's how they kept time. Unlike today. And all of our holidays, everything we put together in modern society are all out of whack with the way that people would be living in harmony with nature. I mean, it's kind of close to a degree, but it's thrown off, and it was thrown off on purpose because when the Christian missionaries and such, the Catholics, took over areas of Europe, they really squashed out these old pagan ideas. And they changed the holidays and moved things around, and they kind of obscured it. And then over the time, people forget. So now we have the Reconstructionists and blah, blah, blah. But the point is, if you know how the moon works and how it'll tell you how it affects people. And there's a whole psychological thing where it's bringing out specific underlying psychologies and subconscious impulses and such, psychic things. It drags out of people because we're tuned to the moon just as much as the sun, because when the sun doesn't reach us, we got to give the moon or we're done as a species. So I wanted to go over this book. It's called Faces of the Moon. It's fairly rare because I don't know if it's a classic, but it needs to be. And this is a book that I found randomly, and it tied my whole occult book collection and magic book collection all together. It's really a central thing, just for the basic thing. And it's called A Guide to Evolving Human Nature by Marilyn Bustede, Richard Tiffany, and Dorothy Vergin, Wergin. And this came out in 1974, and it has a really cool design. But yeah, it's kind of unknown. I don't think it was ever reprinted. And I know there's used copies for maybe 10 or 15 bucks on eBay. But the point is, this is the most systematic working out I've seen of all the different phases of the moon and what's going on there. And this is all crucial stuff to know. So what I wanted to do was just kind of flip through this book and throw out some random stuff. And specifically like the importance of the full moon and with waxing and waning moon and all this and such, and all the different quarters and such. And I'm just going to do a little run through and throw some stuff at you. And then hopefully you can take this information and go get this book. And also keep in mind the idea of lunar gardening. Other people talk about this. If you learn lunar gardening and how plants grow, you also realize how humans' own receptivity buds ideas, they grow. And if you want to, how shall you say, inspire people to do certain things, or you want to, you don't want to say plant, you don't want to say you're manipulating and gardening people, but along those lines, you can do so in a positive, healthy way and just call it something else. This is the way to garden, and it's okay. You're turning people into beautiful flowers. You're not turning them into poison oak. It gives people itchy buttholes when they poop on the grounds. But anyway, so that's getting the phases of the moon. I'm going to get right to it, just some random stuff. So this part is called The Elements of the Lunar Mandala. And a big part of this book is talking about people born under certain phases of the moon and what makes them natives of that. The same way, like if you made a birth chart of your coordinates and compared it to astrology, this is with the moon as well. It's heavily based on the moon. So here's just kind of like talking a bit about it. It's the elements of the lunar mandala. Having touched upon the salient features of modern astrology, which is a really long section, we may proceed directly to the phases of the moon. We will make use of analogy to derive a synchronic wheel of 28 phases under the guidance of astrological tradition, W.B. Yeats, and the results of our own empirical practice. The reader is encouraged to verify for himself any contentions made in this book. Written examples are not nearly as convincing as living examples. As we have seen, astronomical facts take on symbolic value when related to human existence. For instance, the entire solar system corresponds to the entire matter under consideration, in this case a human being. The same ordering principles govern both macrocosm and microcosm. Therefore, the sun, being the most important member of the solar system, corresponds to the most important function of human existence, the will to live and to express life ever more fully through meaningful achievement. If the sun were removed suddenly from its center, the solar system would disintegrate, and life as we know it would cease altogether. Similarly, remove all purpose from life and death is inevitable, as many retirees have learned. In the body, the sun rules the heart, the chief indicator of life and death. Its identifying keyword is potential, pressing for expression. As a satellite of the sun, the Earth depends upon its star for orientation in time-space, as well as for the radiant energy which supports its organisms. In astrology, the sun indicates our sole reason for inhabiting this planet. As the Earth continuously alters its relationship to the sun from day to night and from season to season, people are constantly being born. Variations in the Earth's position with respect to the sun symbolize human variation, and the familiar zodiac was invented to systematize these variations. Although all of us are born with the same solar will to live, living implies a different perspective for each of us. If the analogies drawn so far seem naive, they will become more sophisticated in combination. Sometimes called the greater light, the sun represents a strong, constant urge to succeed, which usually overrides all other considerations. Its only weakness, so to speak, is that it must set every evening. A terrestrial horizon divides daylight and waking activity from night and sleep. Since moonlight prevents total darkness or unconsciousness, it must symbolize a secondary sort of awareness. In the words of an old Jewish allegory, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helpmate for him." Self-conscious awareness is assisted by the subconscious mind. Magic secret. The lunar function in a human organism makes it unnecessary to focus attention on every single activity. Tying one's shoes has become automatic, along with hundreds of other daily routines. Just as the moon reflects the radiant energy of our sun, our subconscious receives and remembers every directive, idea, or experience impressed upon it. It accepts input without question, as young children do. Impressionable infancy and early childhood are ruled by the moon. In many sexist societies, past and present, the moon has been linked by association to women, insofar as they live only to implement the will of their husbands. Like the echoes of a shout into a cave, moonlight is weaker than its primary source. From an understanding of the difference between solar and lunar awareness, compare an average day of coping with life to a day in which vitally important decisions were made. Habit, instinct, dreams, whims, emotional vicissitudes, all program behavior which operates with our focused attention falls within the sphere of the lesser light. Although we have titled this work Phases of the Moon, it must be understood that the moon alone is not responsible for what we observe in the sky. A phase is produced by the light of the sun upon the form of the moon. Were it not for dark bodies such as the moon, we would be unable to perceive light unless we blinded ourselves by staring directly into the sun. The third indispensable component of a phase is the Earth, which provides a single perspective. Viewed from the sun, the moon always appears full, as do all the planets. The phases change only because of our geocentric location. In a unified human being living on planet Earth, a relationship of dynamic cooperation exists between self-conscious and subconscious realms. This ideal union is symbolized in astrology by the phase. More often and less ideally, the lunar half can be seen as mechanically coping with the surroundings, while the will is weak or lacks direction. Many people never fulfill their finest potential because they have not learned to program their own subconscious with fitting suggestions. With no light of its own to judge any of the input, the subconscious is open to suggestions from any source. Parents, teachers, peers, advertising, religious proselytizers. If the input continues to come from one particular source, a habit is formed, which resists being modified by contrary stimuli. Thus, what many people call personal discrimination consists of the strongest conditioned habits. A pattern of habits built up during the formative years defines a personality. Persona, or stylized masks, were worn by actors in ancient Greece, the audience being too far removed from the stage to discern facial expressions. Similarly, all of us wear masks for the majority of people too remote from us to notice anything deeper. However, in many cases, the potential behind the mask has been inhibited from emerging. How often we have found ourselves centerless, living in mere reaction to the fluctuations around us, or to memories of past fluctuations. Instead of sleeping under moonlight, we can begin to program the subconscious with suggestions more relevant to the realization of our inner purpose. As the lunar function lends more and more support to the solar function, we approach a heightened superconscious awareness, which is its own reward. To awaken from the mechanicalness and actually be what in potential we already are is the first lesson of the 28 phases. The second lesson is tolerance. The phases represent the ideal forms of cooperation between self-conscious and subconscious realms. The phases demonstrate a variety of relationships. The antithetical and primary duality precedes all others. Those phases in which the moon is less than half full are primary. Those phases in which the moon is greater than half full are antithetical. To what extent shall we consider others, and to what extent ourselves? Which is more to be trusted, the outer world which can be measured and organized, or the inner world of emotion and creative thought? Are all people united by a common consciousness, or are the differences among them more important? Which matters more, eternal truths or particular experiences? In primary phases, the moon is subordinate to the sun, which means the spirit takes priority over form. General trends are more important than uniquely personal characteristics. A primary person cultivates character, a self-image which naturally conforms to meet the needs of its surroundings. Great character is exemplary, like Gandhi's, in that it epitomizes the ideal norm for the masses. Numbers sanctifies for a lazy primary conscious, but even a more refined type will assume happiness to mean the greatest pleasure for the greatest number of people. When the sun sets and becomes subordinate to a gibbous or full moon, particular exceptions prevail over universal norms. Unlike primary experience, from which we get what we need, the antithetical hemicycle allows time for fulfilling personal desire. High-quality antithetical types are rare. They stand out by virtue of their ability to remain more self than other-directed. They project an aura of uniqueness difficult to define, but undeniable, like the charisma of Greta Garbo or that Austrian guy who took over Germany. Great antithetical minds are able to create their own values, while primary types endorse the teachings of others to claim divine inspiration. In Freudian psychology, the id would be antithetical, and the superego primary, with the conscious will serving as mediator. The music of Johann Sebastian Bach is highly primary, expressing as it does freedom through perfect contrapuntal order in an atmosphere of Christian awe and gratitude. At the other extreme, a mere 3 or 4 bars will suffice to identify a composition as exclusively Chopin's. In most of his creative output, he expressed authentic antithetical emotions, and his music is inseparable from the instrument for which it was written. In ancient Greece, comedy and tragedy were co-featured at the annual festival honoring Dionysus, the god of wine, frenzy, and inspiration. The lighter playwrights poked ribald fun at absolutely anyone they cared to. What could be better primary medicine than laughter over human inconsistencies, and what rule of fair play could be more primary than that which exempts no one from satire? Tragedy afforded the satisfaction of emotional catharsis. The only real aristocracy in the world is made up of those who can ennoble undeserved suffering with an intensity of feeling worthy of it. Pulls apart from masochism and bathos, tragedy uplifts because it educates. The vision of evil, made clearest at full moon, is to recognize oneself as the enemy of God, whose law it is that he learns must suffer, and even in our sleep pain that cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, and our despite against her will comes wisdom of the awful grace of God. A bunch of Christian gibberish. Oh, it's Aeschylus. Aeschylus. He's a Greek writer. It ties into what said before. But by the time this wisdom and grace has arrived, we are older, once again primary. The two tinctures, as Yeats called them, continually interact, smile changing to frown and back again to smile. In the first quarter, we find ourselves in the world. In the second quarter, we lose the world in ourselves. In the third quarter, we find the world in ourselves. And in the fourth quarter, we lose ourselves in the world. In the first quarter, a child makes his parents proud of him. In the second, he rebels. In the third, he makes peace. In the fourth, he realizes to what extent they had been right. The first quarter is ambitious, the second revolutionary, the third cooperative, and the fourth obedient. Instinct and intellect grow increasingly more complex, leading eventually to conflict at first or last quarter. Emotion and perception each grow simpler, leading eventually to a realization of unity at full or new moon. Additional information and blah, 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 blah. Primary plus waxing equals instinct. Degree span 0 to 90. Antithetical plus waxing equals emotion. Degree span 90 to 180. Antithetical plus waning equals creative intellect. 180 to 270. Primary plus waning equals perception. 270 to 360. Do you see the key up with the four worlds of the Kabbalah? Ho, 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 ho. Magic. Secrets everywhere. Tinctures are derived from the rate at which the moon is gaining or losing light. The activity, and this is the tincture, is like when the moon it cuts in. It's all these weird cycles. They're not talking about tinctures that you would rub on yourself, like made of oil or something. It's the moon being like spiked by other phases of the moon. It's kind of like when you add astrological signs, what have you. So he says tinctures are derived from the rate at which the moon is gaining or losing light. In figure 12, blah, blah, blah. The word tincture comes from Yeats and suggests a stain or all-pervading quality. A person's phase lends a subtle tint to the entire being, which persists behind the more obvious behavior patterns. It is his underlying attitude, which varies from extreme primary to extreme antithetical, with an unstable equilibrium in between. According to the naive symbolism of astrology, a rapidly changing moon denotes sweeping changes in the outward appearance of the life brought on by serious commitment and vigorous effort. Alarmism is not unusual here. The native is caught up in modern civilization, tangled as it has never been before. Serene detachment does not benefit him. Once past, the same opportunity will not return again. If decisive action is not taken at the right time, later years will occasion much regret over unused talent. Life need not be a frenetic rush, but neither is there a moment to waste. Open tinctures imply that deliberate effort is not necessary for fulfillment. The native gets what he needs or wants by visualizing it as already in existence and then allowing it to manifest in the outer circumstances of his life. Any action he takes is spontaneous, not pre-planned. Lack of faith and hazy mental picture cause failure more certainly than in any fault the native may find with others. Once he has come to terms with his opposite phase, he should meet with the little difficulty in whatever he attempts. When out of phase, he will work himself to death without ever being satisfied with the results. From phase 5 to 11, there is a strong rise in individual self-sufficiency, while the opposite sector symbolizes a surge in social consciousness. The phases clustered about the full moon represent a wholly self-centered outlook on life, while the phases lost to solar brilliance represent self-loss in spirit or nature. We might say that spiritual objectivity is similar to the collective unconscious of Jung, spiritual subjectivity to the personal unconscious, physical subjectivity to conscious volition, and physical objectivity to social directives and codes of behavior. The shading shows a trend from extreme absorption in common experience to extreme self-absorption. And then we presented with a preliminary overview of the system. Out of phase means denial of one's inner potential, a sort of self-deception, while in phase means self-affirmation. As soon as we have determined how many degrees each phase is to contain, we will be ready for a full exposition of phases of the moon. And there's some really, all this huge, intense, ultra scientific data. And then it talks about the skeleton of time. And I'm just going to bring this up real quick so I can wrap it off. But just the skeleton of time, it's all plotted out. It looks beautiful. And there are 28 phases to equal the average number of days in the lunar month. 360 degrees divided by 28 yields 12 degree 86 per phase, a number roughly equal to the daily average motion of the moon. This equal phase method is the simplest way to determine one's phase. Starting with the sun's position in the birth chart and proceeding counterclockwise to the moon's position, figure the number of degrees between the two luminaries. Then consult the skeleton of time wheel. It's called the completed division. Inner wheel, outer wheel, lunar phases, solar phases. If you look up on Google, you probably find it. Unlike orthodox astrology, this system hardly allows for a cuspal factor, since the phases are so small to begin with. For borderline cases within 1 degree, examine both phases involved, giving more weight to the later one. Since Yeats never designated unambiguously how to divide the cycle into 28 portions, we have developed a method of division based on close correspondences between the phases and signs of the zodiac. The 12 signs, representing every possible experience, form an appropriate backdrop for the lumination cycle of individual fulfillment. Not only does the zodiac facilitate dividing the cycle, but it adds depth to the interpretation of each phase as well. In the example above, full treatment of the zodiac is well beyond the scope of this book. The most we can do for uninitiated readers is to illustrate the arrangement of signs and planetary rulers and figure blah, 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 blah. Deacons relate signs of the same element through sub-rulership, as can be seen, blah, blah, blah. On a smaller scale, the 3 deacons, which make up any sign, resemble the cardinal fixed mutable succession of signs. The first 10 degrees of a sign are the purest, cardinal. The second decan is colored by the following sign of the same element, fixed, while the third decan bears the influence of the preceding sign of the same element, mutable. And, man, there's just endless information. But I think that if you know what I'm talking about in this, you've just soaked up a lot of important information. So I'm just going to cap it off there and once again say it's called Phases of the Moon, A Guide to Evolving Human Nature, from 1974 and by Marilyn Busted, B-U-S-T-E-D, Richard Tiffany, and Dorothy Wergin, W-E-R-G-I-N. By Shambhala Press from Berkeley in London, 1974. Find it, enjoy it, have your mind blown, hit the subscribe button, tell people, let them know I exist. All free secrets of magic always coming to you. As long as you guys keep coming and checking this stuff out, I'll keep making the stuff up. Well, not making it up, I'm relating it, but you know what I mean, guys, eh? So, until next time, latest.
Magick.